Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the alien space station grow larger on the main screen. Nexus Prime was massive, bigger than any city on Earth. Its metal surface gleamed with strange lights and symbols he could not read. Ships from across the galaxy floated around it like moths around a flame. Jake felt his stomach tighten. In 2 hours, Earth's entire space fleet would dock at that station, all 12 ships. He looked out the side window at the other vessels in his small convoy. They looked tiny next to the alien ships they passed. The human ships were gray and angular, built for function rather than beauty. Their hulls showed scratches and burn marks from years of hard use. "Admiral, we're getting more communications from the alien ships," said Lieutenant Kate Walsh from her station. She was young, maybe 25, with short brown hair and nervous eyes. "Most of it we can't translate, but our computers are picking up what sounds like laughter." Jake nodded grimly. He had expected this. When Earth first made contact with the galactic community 3 years ago, the reactions had been mixed. Some aliens were curious about humans. Others seemed amused. A few appeared insulted that such a primitive species had somehow stumbled into space travel. Captain Lisa Brown walked up beside him. She was his best officer, smart and quick-thinking. Her uniform was crisp despite the long journey from Earth. "Sir, the Zephyrian flagship just sent us a message. They want us to dock in the small ship section next to the cargo haulers." Jake's jaw clenched. The Zephyrians thought they were better than everyone else. Their ships were sleek and silver, shaped like giant teardrops. Each one was 3 times larger than his biggest vessel. "Tell them we'll dock wherever the station assigns us, Captain." "Yes, sir." Dr. Amy Clark floated onto the bridge in the low gravity. She was the mission's xenobiologist and expert on alien life. Her job was to help humans understand the strange creatures they would meet. She grabbed a handrail to steady herself. "Admiral, I've been studying the cultural files on our hosts. The Galactic Council takes honor very seriously. They judge species by the size and power of their fleets." "Well, we're going to disappoint them," Jake said. He had commanded Earth's space forces for 15 years. He had seen humanity grow from a single-planet species to masters of their own solar system. But compared to the galactic powers, humans were still children playing with toys. Commander Pete Johnson's voice crackled over the intercom from the engine room. "Admiral, we're getting scanned by every ship out here. Their sensors are more advanced than ours. They probably know everything about our ships already." Jake picked up the communicator. "What are they learning, Pete?" "That we're running on nuclear fusion, using chemical rockets for fine movement, and our weapons are basically fancy bullets and missiles. Nothing they haven't seen before, I'd guess." Through the main window, Jake could see a massive ship shaped like a crystal mountain. It belonged to the Crystalline Collective, beings made of living rock and metal. Their vessels were works of art, covered in geometric patterns that shifted and changed color. Next to it floated a black ship with no visible windows or lights. That was from the Void Syndicate, mysterious aliens that lived in the empty spaces between stars. All of their ships made Earth's fleet look like toys. "Docking request approved," Kate announced. "We're assigned to Bay 94 through 105. The automated systems will guide us in." The next hour passed slowly as the human ships moved into position. Jake watched through the cameras as alien crews gathered at viewing ports to stare at the newcomers. Some pointed and gestured. Others turned away as if bored. The docking bay was enormous, designed to hold ships much larger than theirs. Earth's 12 vessels looked lost in the vast space. Jake's flagship, the UES Liberty, was the largest at only 200 meters long. The alien ships around them stretched for kilometers. "All ships report successful docking," Lisa announced. "The station is extending atmosphere bridges." Jake straightened his uniform and checked his sidearm. Earth's leaders had chosen him to represent humanity because he was experienced and calm under pressure. But he had never felt pressure like this. The future of the human race might depend on what happened in the next few hours. The first person to greet them was Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian Empire. He was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and 4 arms. His clothing was made of flowing silver fabric that seemed to move on its own. 2 guards flanked him, carrying weapons that hummed with energy. "So," Veltar said in perfect English, "these are the famous humans we have heard so much about." His voice carried a tone of barely hidden amusement. "And this is your mighty fleet?" Jake kept his expression neutral. "This is Earth's deep space exploration force, yes." Veltar walked around the docked ships, his guards following. Other aliens began to gather. Jake recognized some species from the files Amy had shown him. There were the insect-like hive queens, the gaseous beings called nebula dancers, and others he could not identify. 12 ships, Veltar announced, loudly enough for everyone to hear. The humans bring 12 tiny ships to petition the Galactic Council. Several aliens made sounds that the translation computers identified as laughter. A crystalline collective representative, a being that looked like a walking diamond, approached. Its voice rang like wind chimes. "These vessels appear to be constructed from common metals and ceramics. How quaint. Their largest ship is smaller than our shuttlecraft," added a Void Syndicate delegate, its form barely visible inside a dark environmental suit. Jake felt Lisa tense beside him, but he placed a warning hand on her arm. Getting angry would only make things worse. "Perhaps," Veltar continued, "the humans misunderstood our invitation. We asked for representatives, not refugees." More laughter echoed through the bay. Jake had expected mockery, but the reality stung, worse than he had anticipated. These beings saw humans as primitives barely worthy of notice. Amy stepped forward. "If I may," she said politely. "Humans prefer to judge others by their actions, not their possessions." Veltar's 4 eyes focused on her. "How very primitive of you, Dr. Clark." The fact that he knew her name was unsettling. "Actions without power are meaningless. Your species will learn this soon enough." A new voice interrupted them. It came from the station's communication system, speaking in multiple languages at once. "All delegates report to Council Chamber 1 immediately. Emergency session is now in effect." The alien suddenly looked serious. Veltar's amusement disappeared. "Emergency session? That has not happened in 50 years. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Whatever was happening, it was big enough to scare beings who treated humans like children. As they followed the alien delegates toward the council chambers, he wondered if Earth's tiny fleet was about to face something much worse than mockery. The council chamber was a massive dome filled with floating platforms. Each platform held delegates from different species. Jake Morrison and his team found themselves on a small platform near the back, far from the center where the most important races sat. The chamber buzzed with nervous energy. Aliens who had been laughing at humans minutes ago now whispered urgently among themselves. Jake noticed that even the proud Zephyrians looked worried. At the center of the dome, a holographic display flickered to life. The image showed the edge of the galaxy, where stars were scattered thin and space was mostly empty. Red dots began appearing on the display, moving slowly but steadily toward the galactic core. "Council members," announced a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Long-range sensors have detected the return of the Devourers." The chamber fell silent. Jake had never heard that name before, but the reaction of the aliens told him everything he needed to know. Several delegates made sounds of fear. Others began talking rapidly in their own languages. Lisa Brown leaned close to Jake. "Sir, our translation computers are having trouble with all the overlapping conversations, but they keep picking up words like death and extinction." Dr. Amy Clark was studying her tablet, reading through the xenobiology files. "Admiral, I'm finding references to something called the Devourer War. It happened about 1,000 years ago. The details are limited, but it looks like entire civilizations were wiped out." The holographic display zoomed in on the red dots. They were ships, but unlike anything Jake had ever seen. They looked organic, like giant insects or sea creatures floating through space. The largest ones were kilometers long with surfaces that seemed to pulse and move. Ambassador Veltar stood on his platform, his 4 arms gesturing wildly. "This cannot be accurate. The Devourers were destroyed. The old records clearly state they were eliminated." The records were wrong, replied the chamber's voice. Our most distant monitoring stations detected the fleet 6 hours ago. Analysis confirms biomechanical signatures matching historical data. Commander Rick Stone, one of Jake's veteran pilots, was studying the display through binoculars. Admiral, those ships, they don't look built. They look grown. A new platform rose from the floor, carrying a being Jake had never seen before. It was ancient, with wrinkled gray skin and eyes that seemed to hold the weight of centuries. When it spoke, every other delegate listened. I am historian Kethmore of the Archive Worlds. I was young when the Devourers last came. I remember the burning planets and the screaming void where stars once shone. The chamber grew even quieter. Jake felt a chill run through him. The Devourers are not like us, Kethmore continued. They do not conquer or rule. They consume. They strip planets of all life, all resources, all hope. Their ships are living creatures bred for war and hunger. They turn entire solar systems into empty shells. Lieutenant Kate Walsh was monitoring communications from the human fleet. Admiral, we're receiving panicked messages from colonies throughout the Outer Rim. Ships are evacuating, abandoning entire planets. The holographic display updated, showing dozens of new red dots. The Devourer fleet was larger than anyone had expected. How many ships? Asked a delegate from the Crystal Collective. Initial count suggests over 10,000 vessels, came the reply. More are still emerging from dark space. 10,000 ships. Jake looked at his own tiny fleet and felt a weight settle in his stomach. Earth's 12 vessels wouldn't even register as a threat to such a force. The Zephyrian war leader, a massive being covered in golden armor, stood up. The Imperial fleet will withdraw to defend our core worlds. We cannot waste resources on a hopeless battle. Other delegates began agreeing. The insect-like hive queens chittered among themselves before announcing their retreat. The Void Syndicate simply vanished, their platforms disappearing without a word. This is madness, said a delegate from the mining guilds. We should stand, together, combine our fleets. Against 10,000 Devourers? Veltar laughed bitterly. The combined military might of 50 civilizations could not stop them 1,000 years ago. We had twice as many ships then and better technology. Jake watched the panic spread through the chamber. These beings who had mocked humanity's small fleet were now running from an enemy they couldn't fight. The irony was not lost on him. Doctor, Clark looked up from her research. Admiral, I'm reading some disturbing reports. The Devourers don't just destroy planets. They absorb them. The biomass, the minerals, even the atmosphere. They leave nothing but empty rock floating in space. How long until they reach the core worlds? Jake asked. The chamber's voice answered his question. At current speed, the Vanguard will reach the outer colonies in 72 hours. Core worlds will be threatened within 10 days. The evacuation orders were already going out. Jake could see alien fleets on the display. Hundreds of ships fleeing toward the galaxy's center. Military vessels that had seemed impressive now looked small and fragile compared to the approaching swarm. What about the outer colonies? Jake asked loudly. There are billions of people out there. They are lost, Veltar replied coldly. Sacrifice, the few to save the many. It is the only logical choice. Jake felt anger rise in his chest. These aliens would abandon entire worlds without a fight. Back on Earth, humans had a saying about never leaving anyone behind. Admiral, Lisa said quietly, our fleet is too small to make a difference. Even if we stayed, we couldn't save those colonies. Jake looked at the display again. The red dots were moving closer, like a disease spreading through the galaxy. Behind them, the empty spaces where civilizations once thrived. Maybe we can't save them all, he said finally. But we can try to save some. The chamber was emptying as delegates rushed back to their ships. The great evacuation was beginning. Soon only the humans remained on their small platform, watching the tide of refugees flee toward the galactic core. Commander Pete Johnson's voice came through the communicator. Admiral, we're getting requests from the station. They want to know our evacuation destination. Jake looked at his officers. Amy was still reading through the historical files. Lisa was calculating distances and fuel consumption. Kate was monitoring the flood of panicked communications. Rick was studying the enemy fleet movements. "Tell them we're not evacuating," Jake said. "Sir?" Pete's voice was uncertain. "You heard me, Commander. Earth's fleet is staying." The last alien ships were leaving the station now, heading for the safety of the inner worlds. Soon the outer rim would be empty, except for the approaching Devourers and 12 small ships from a planet called Earth. Jake Morrison looked at the red dots on the display and made a decision that would change everything. Sometimes the smallest fleet had to make the biggest stand. The Nexus Prime station was almost empty now. Most alien ships had fled toward the galaxy's center, leaving behind only emergency crews and automated systems. Jake Morrison stood in the station's command center, watching his 12 ships move into position between the approaching Devourers and the evacuation routes. "Admiral, the first Devourer scouts will be here in 6 hours," reported Captain Lisa Brown. She had been working without sleep, coordinating the fleet's movements. Long-range sensors show about 50 ships in the advance group, 50 against 12. Jake had faced bad odds before, but nothing like this. He looked at the tactical display showing his small fleet spread out in a defensive line. The UES Liberty led the formation, with the other 11 ships positioned to cover as much space as possible. Commander Rick Stone's voice came through the radio from his fighter squadron. "Admiral, I've got visual contact with the lead Devourer ship. It's alive, sir." On the main screen, the image appeared. The Devourer vessel looked like a massive sea creature swimming through space. Its surface was covered in what looked like scales or armor plates that moved and shifted. Tentacle-like extensions reached out from its sides, tasting the vacuum around it. "It's beautiful and horrible at the same time," whispered Dr. Amy Clark. She was recording everything, trying to understand what they were fighting. "The bioscans show it has a nervous system, circulatory networks, even what might be a brain." Sergeant Tony Lee, the Marine commander, was checking his weapons for the 100th time. "So we're fighting giant space monsters. Great. Do we even know if our guns can hurt these things? We're about to find out," Jake replied grimly. The Devourer scout ship was massive, easily 10 times larger than the Liberty. As it came closer, smaller creatures detached from its hull. They looked like flying sharks with metal teeth and glowing eyes. "Multiple contacts," announced Lieutenant Kate Walsh. "The big one is launching attack craft." "All ships, prepare for combat," Jake ordered. "Remember, we're not trying to win, we're buying time for the evacuation ships to get clear." The first engagement began badly. Human missiles struck the Devourer's hull and exploded, but the creature barely seemed to notice. Its bioarmor absorbed the impacts like water. The smaller attack craft swarmed toward the human fleet, moving with the fluid grace of living things. Commander Pete Johnson's ship, the UES Challenger, fired its main cannon. The tungsten rounds punched holes in the Devourer's hide, but the wounds sealed themselves within seconds. "Our weapons aren't working," Pete reported. "The thing heals too fast." Rick Stone led his fighters against the smaller creatures. His squadron's laser cannons cut through several of the shark-like attackers, but more kept coming. These little ones die easier, but there are too many of them. Jake watched his people fight a losing battle. 2 of his ships had already taken heavy damage. The Devourer scout was moving closer, its tentacles reaching out toward the station. "Admiral," Amy said suddenly, "I'm reading something strange. The creature's biopatterns, they're not random. There's a rhythm to them, like a heartbeat." Lisa looked at the sensor readings. "She's right, sir. The entire ship pulses every 30 seconds. The armor plates, the tentacles, even the smaller creatures." Jake studied the display. Amy was right. The entire creature moved in a pattern, like breathing or a pulse. "What does that mean, Doctor?" "All living things have weak points," Amy said, her fingers flying over her tablet. "Nerve clusters, vital organs, circulation bottlenecks. If this is truly a living ship, it has to have critical systems we can target." Chief Helen Ross, the master gunner on the Liberty, had been listening. "Admiral, if we can find where this thing's brain is, I can put a tungsten round right through it." The battle was getting worse. The UES Defender had lost main power and was drifting. The smaller devourer creatures were swarming over it like parasites. There. Amy pointed at a section of the creature's hull that glowed brighter than the rest. That area shows intense neural activity. It's probably a major nerve cluster. All ships, target the glowing section on the creature's spine, Jake ordered. Concentrate fire on my mark. The human fleet turned toward the massive creature. It was almost on top of them now, its shadow blocking out the stars. Jake could see details on its surface, the way the armor plates shifted and the tentacles writhed. Fire! 12 ships opened fire at once. Missiles, cannon rounds, and energy beams all struck the glowing nerve cluster. The creature's reaction was immediate and violent. It convulsed, its tentacles whipping wildly through space. The smaller attack craft suddenly stopped their coordinated assault and began flying in confused circles. It worked, Lisa shouted. The thing is hurt. But the victory was short-lived. The creature began to retreat, but not before launching a final attack. Its tentacles lashed out at the closest human ship, the UES Ranger. The vessel was crushed like an egg, its crew lost in seconds. Jake felt sick as he watched good people. But something important had happened. For the first time in recorded history, a devourer had retreated from battle. Admiral, Kate's voice was excited. We're getting messages from the alien evacuation fleets. They saw what happened. The Zephyrian commander is asking how we hurt the creature. On the tactical display, more red dots were approaching. The main devourer force was coming, drawn by the distress signals from their scout. How many? Jake asked. 200 ships, sir. All of them bigger than the scout. Jake looked at his remaining 11 ships. They had learned something valuable about fighting the devourers, but at a terrible cost. One ship destroyed, several, others damaged, and now they faced an enemy 20 times larger. Signal the fleet, he ordered. All ships maintain position. We're not done here. Lisa stared at him. Sir, we can't fight 200 of those things. Maybe not, Jake replied. But we hurt one of them. That means they can be hurt. That means they can be beaten. Amy was still studying her readings. Admiral, I'm detecting communication signals between the approaching ships. They're talking to each other, sharing information about our attack. What kind of information? They know we found their weak spot. They're adapting, changing their approach patterns. Jake smiled grimly. Good. That means they're afraid of us. The alien evacuation fleets were still fleeing, but some ships had slowed down. Word was spreading that the humans had actually damaged a devourer. Species that had mocked Earth's tiny fleet were now watching with interest. Rick Stone's fighters were regrouping, ready for another attack. Pete Johnson was rerouting power to weapons and shields. Helen Ross was loading the biggest rounds they had. Tony Lee was preparing his Marines for boarding actions that seemed impossible, but might be necessary. On the display, the devourer fleet was spreading out, approaching from multiple directions. They had learned from the scouts' defeat and were not going to make the same mistake. Jake Morrison looked at his small fleet and felt a strange sense of pride. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they had proven something important. The top devourers could be hurt. The ancient terror that had destroyed civilizations was not invincible. All ships, prepare for battle, he ordered. Today we show the galaxy that size isn't everything. The second wave of devourers was almost within range. 200 living ships against 11 human vessels. But now the humans knew what they were fighting, and more importantly, they knew how to fight it. The real battle was about to begin. The second battle lasted 3 hours. Jake Morrison's fleet fought like wildcats against the 200 devourer ships. They used hit-and-run tactics, striking at nerve clusters and retreating before the creatures could respond. It worked, but the cost was terrible. The UES Falcon was torn apart by tentacles. The UES Phoenix went down fighting, taking 2 devourers with it. The UES Thunder lost its engines and had to be abandoned. Jake watched his fleet shrink from 11 ships to 8, then to 6, but something amazing was happening. Other ships were appearing on the long-range sensors. The alien evacuation fleets had stopped running. Some were actually turning around. Admiral, called Lieutenant Kate Walsh, We're getting messages from the Zephyrian fleet. Ambassador Veltar wants to speak with you. Jake wiped blood from a cut on his forehead. The Liberty had taken a beating, but she was still fighting. Put him through. Veltar's image appeared on the screen. The proud alien looked different now, his 4 eyes wide with something that might have been respect. Admiral Morrison, my sensors show you have destroyed 17 Devourer vessels. 18, Jake corrected, watching another creature writhe and die after Helen Ross put a tungsten round through its brain cluster. Impossible. No one has killed so many Devourers since the ancient wars. We're just getting started, Jake replied, though he knew his fleet couldn't last much longer. The Imperial Council has voted. We are returning to assist you. Jake almost laughed. 6 hours ago, these same aliens had mocked his tiny fleet. Now they wanted to help after seeing what humans could do. We welcome the assistance, he said diplomatically. More alien fleets were turning around. The Crystal Collective's mountain ships, the Void Syndicate's shadow vessels, even the insect hive queens were coming back. Word had spread across the galaxy that the humans had found a way to kill Devourers. Dr. Amy Clark was coordinating with the returning alien forces, sharing the tactical data about nerve cluster targeting. Admiral, the combined fleet will have over 3,000 ships. That should be enough to stop the Devourer advance. But Jake was watching the long-range sensors with growing dread. Something new was appearing at the edge of the system. Something so large it made the other Devourer ships look like children's toys. My God, whispered Captain Lisa Brown. What is that thing? The Mothership was enormous beyond comprehension. It stretched for hundreds of kilometers, a living mountain of flesh and biometal floating through space. As it moved closer, smaller, ships poured from openings in its hull like blood from a wound. Thousands of them. Commander Rick Stone's voice was tight with fear. Admiral, that thing is bigger than some moons. How do we fight something like that? The Mothership's arrival changed everything. The smaller Devourer ships that had been fighting the humans suddenly broke off their attacks and moved to escort positions around their massive parent. The creature's presence seemed to make them stronger, more coordinated. It's a hive mind, Amy realized. The big one controls all the others. That's why they got more organized when it arrived. Jake felt a chill as the Mothership moved between his fleet and the system's sun. Its bulk was so enormous that it actually blocked the light, casting the entire area into shadow. Stars disappeared behind its massive form. Navigator Beth Collins was running calculations on her computer. Her hands shook as she read the results. Admiral, the Mothership is spawning new creatures. The biomass readings are off the charts. It's creating hundreds of new ships every hour. The alien fleets had arrived, but they stopped short when they saw the Mothership. 3,000 ships seemed like a lot until you saw something the size of a small planet. Veltar's image appeared on screen again. Admiral, our combined fleet cannot defeat that creature. We should retreat to the inner systems and prepare defensive positions. Jake looked at the tactical display. The alien was right. Even with all their ships working together, they didn't have enough firepower to damage something that large. But retreating meant abandoning the outer colonies to their fate. No, Jake said. We end this here. Commander Pete Johnson had been studying the Mothership's readings. Admiral, I've been working on something with Dr. Clark. The creature's size might be its weakness. Explain. Amy pulled up a bioscan of the Mothership. The nerve clusters that control the smaller ships are distributed throughout its body. But there's a central brain, a core that coordinates everything else. If we could reach it. The thing is hundreds of kilometers long, Lisa pointed out. Even if we found the brain, how would we get close enough to attack it? Pete smiled grimly. I've been modifying our remaining nuclear warheads with technology borrowed from the alien ships. The yield would be enough to damage even something that size. Captain Sam Davis, the fleet's demolitions expert, looked up from his calculations. It would have to be a suicide run. Someone would have to fly directly into the creature and detonate the warhead manually. The bridge fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. Whoever made the attack would not be coming back. I'll do it, Jake said immediately. No, sir, Sam replied. With respect, you're needed to command the fleet. This is my job. Before Jake could argue, alarms started ringing throughout the ship. The Mothership was moving again, and its escort fleet was spreading out to attack positions. "Admiral," Kate called out, "the alien fleets are requesting orders. They're willing to follow our lead." Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. These people had followed him into an impossible battle, and somehow found a way to win. Now they faced something even worse. "Signal all ships," he ordered. "Combined fleet will engage the escort vessels. Keep them busy and away from Captain Davis." Sam Davis was already suiting up for his mission. The UES Defiance, one of their fastest ships, had been loaded with Pete's modified warhead. It was their only chance. "How long do we need to keep the escorts busy?" Lisa asked. 30 minutes, Sam replied through his helmet radio. "That's how long it will take to reach the Mothership's core." 30 minutes didn't sound like much time, but fighting thousands of Devourer ships while their Mothership spawned more every minute, it might as well have been forever. The combined alien and human fleet moved into attack formation. Zephyrian teardrops flew alongside human angular vessels. Crystal mountains advanced next to shadow ships from the void. Species that had been enemies for centuries now fought side by side against a common threat. The Mothership's escort fleet rushed to meet them. The largest space battle in Galactic. History was about to begin. Jake Morrison looked at the massive creature that had blocked out the sun and made his final choice. "All ships, attack. Today we take back the light." Captain Sam Davis guided the UES Defiance through the chaos of the largest space battle in galactic history. Around him, thousands of ships fought desperately against the Devourer swarm. Explosions lit up the darkness like deadly fireworks. The Mothership loomed ahead of him, so massive it filled his entire view. Its surface was covered in moving parts, tentacles that reached out like searching fingers, and openings that constantly birthed new enemy ships. Sam had to find a way through all of that to reach the creature's brain. "Defiance, this is Admiral Morrison." Jake's voice crackled through the radio. "Status report." 20 minutes out from the target, sir," Sam replied, dodging a cluster of shark-like attackers. "The aliens are keeping most of the escorts busy, but I'm still picking up pursuit." Behind him, the combined fleet was fighting with everything they had. Zephyrian energy beams cut through Devourer hide, while human missiles found nerve clusters with deadly precision. The Crystal Collective ships used their mountain-like mass to ram smaller creatures, while Void Syndicate vessels appeared and disappeared, like ghosts striking from unexpected angles. But the Mothership kept spawning more enemies. For every Devourer they destroyed, 2 more emerged from the giant creature's hull. Dr. Amy Clark's voice came through on a private channel. "Sam, I've been studying the Mothership's biopatterns. The brain cluster should be near the center, about 50 kilometers in from the outer hull. 50 kilometers. Sam would have to fly deep into the creature's body, through whatever defenses it had inside. Any idea what I'll find in there?" "Antibodies," Amy said grimly. "The creature's immune system will try to destroy anything it sees as an infection. You'll be flying through a living nightmare." Lieutenant Grace Murphy, the youngest officer on Sam's crew, was monitoring the ship's systems. "Captain, we're taking damage from those pursuit ships. Shield generators are down to 60%. Sam looked at his small crew. Only 5 people had volunteered for the suicide mission. They all knew they weren't coming back. But they had come anyway. "Grace, can you give me more speed?" "I can reroute power from life support," she replied. "We won't need it much longer anyway." The Defiance shot forward, leaving its pursuers behind. The Mothership's hull was getting closer now. Sam could see the details of its surface, the way the bioarmor plates shifted and moved like breathing. "Skin. There," pointed Colonel Frank Taylor, who had insisted on leading the assault team. "That opening looks big enough for our ship." The opening was like a wound in the creature's side, large enough to fly a ship through. But as they approached, Sam could see movement inside. The creature's immune system was already responding to their presence. They flew into the Mothership's body and entered hell. The interior was a maze of tunnels lined with pulsing flesh. Organic pipes carried glowing fluids through the walls, and everywhere antibody creatures swarmed toward them. They looked like flying tumors with teeth, dozens of them attacking from all directions. "Frank, man the guns," Sam ordered. Grace, find us a path to the brain cluster. The Defiance fought its way deeper into the creature. Taylor's guns cut down antibodies while Murphy navigated through the twisting passages. The ship's hull scraped against tunnel walls that tried to close, around them like a closing throat. I'm reading massive neural activity dead ahead, Murphy announced. That has to be it. They burst into a vast chamber filled with pulsing brain tissue. The walls were covered in nerve clusters that sparked with electrical activity. This was the Mothership's mind, the thing that controlled thousands of other creatures across the galaxy. But they weren't alone. The chamber was full of antibodies, all converging on their ship. Amy was right, Sam muttered. It's a nightmare in here. Dr. Clark's voice came through one last time. Sam, I'm detecting something else. The creature is trying to communicate with you. Suddenly, images flooded Sam's mind. He saw the Devourer's history, their desperate flight from something even worse. They weren't evil conquerors. They were refugees consuming everything in their path because they had no choice. Behind them, in the dark spaces between galaxies, something terrible was hunting them. Captain, Grace shouted, the antibodies are backing off. The creature is trying to talk to us. The massive brain cluster pulsed with patterns of light. Through some impossible bioelectric connection, Sam could understand what it was trying to say. The Devourers were fleeing an ancient enemy, something that made them look harmless by comparison. They consumed planets not from cruelty, but from desperate hunger as they ran for their lives. For a moment, Sam hesitated. These creatures were not the monsters everyone thought they were. They were victims, just like the people they had killed. But then he thought about the billions of lives already lost, the civilizations destroyed, the colonies turned to empty shells. Understanding the Devourers didn't change what they had done. I'm sorry, Sam whispered to the vast mind around him, but this has to end. He triggered the modified warhead. The explosion didn't destroy the mothership. Instead, it severed the connections between the central brain and the rest of the creature's nervous system. The massive mind went dark, cut off from its body and the thousands of ships it controlled. Throughout the battle zone, Devourer ships suddenly stopped moving. The coordinated swarm became a collection of confused individual creatures. Some fled into deep space. Others simply drifted, their connection to the hive mind broken. The mothership itself began to move away from the system. Its body was still alive, but its controlling intelligence was gone. Like a wounded animal, it retreated into the darkness, between stars, taking its remaining children with it. Jake Morrison watched from the Liberty's bridge as sunlight slowly returned to the system. The massive creature that had blocked out the stars was moving away, its shadow lifting from the combined fleet. Admiral, Kate Walsh announced, we're receiving surrender signals from the remaining Devourer ships. They're asking for safe passage, out of the system. Jake nodded. Granted, they're not our enemy anymore. Ambassador Veltar appeared on the screen, his 4 eyes bright with something Jake had never seen before. Respect. Admiral Morrison, the Galactic Council would like to formally invite Earth to join as a full member. Your species has proven worthy of our highest honors. Thank you, Jake replied. But we didn't do this for honor. We did it because it was right. Dr. Amy Clark was already working on plans to help the scattered Devourer survivors. If they were truly refugees from something worse, maybe there was a way to find them a new home without destroying other civilizations. The combined fleet began the long work of rescue and recovery. Ships that had been enemies that morning now worked together to save survivors and tend to the wounded. Jake looked at the tactical display one last time. Earth's fleet was down to 4 ships from the original 12. So many good people had died in the battle. But they had saved billions of lives and proven that even the smallest force could make the biggest difference. Signal Earth, he ordered. Tell them the galaxy is safe. Tell them we're coming home. Lieutenant Grace Murphy had survived the explosion by ejecting in an escape pod at the last second. As rescue ships picked her up, she looked back at the UA, retreating mothership, and wondered what other threats might be lurking in the dark spaces beyond the galaxy. But that was a problem for another day. Today, The sun was shining again, and the tiny fleet from Earth had shown the galaxy that sometimes the greatest victories come from the most unexpected heroes. The age of human respect in the galactic community had begun.